Welcome to GameSpot Live. I'm Greg Kasavin here to tell you all about Yoshi's Island Super Mario Advance 3 for the Game Boy Advance. If you didn't know it, you wouldn't be able to tell that Yoshi's Island is actually a game that first was released back in 1995 for the Super Nintendo. That's because it seems as fresh and as new as ever here on the Game Boy Advance. Billed as a sequel to Super Mario World, Yoshi's Island actually doesn't star the Mario brothers per se, although Mario is featured prominently in the game. It's actually all about Yoshi, as the name suggests. Yoshi is, of course, Mario's kind of green lizard pal. The game serves as a prequel to all the other Mario games and begins when the newborn babies, Mario and Luigi, are kind of being flown by a stork that's then assaulted by some wicked Koopas who foresee that the Mario brothers will eventually be their undoing. So they attack this stork, and Luigi is captured and Mario is dropped. And miraculously, he lands on Yoshi's back on the middle of Yoshi's Island, and it's actually this big lizard tribe of all these multicolored lizards, and they take it upon themselves to reunite the brothers and give the Koopas a good old black eye for good measure. So thus begins your quest through 6 worlds and 8 different stages in each world. So we're talking about dozens of different stages of really great platforming, fun and enjoyment and hilarity at times. Since this is a game about Yoshi, the mechanics aren't exactly the same as what you'd find in other Mario games. Like Yoshi from Super Mario World, this guy can still jump and stomp on foes, and he can also lash out with his tongue, either forwards or upwards, to first snatch and then swallow or spit out his foes. When he swallows his foes, Yoshi's enemies turn into little eggs that follow behind him, and Yoshi can then use these eggs as thrown projectiles that he can throw in any direction. Actually, one of the cool little mechanics in the game is you can deflect eggs off of walls as though you were kind of going for a bank shot in billiards, so you'll sometimes have to chuck eggs around corners and take little good shots like that. Of course, what's probably most important in Yoshi's Island is precision jumping. Yoshi can run nice and fast and jump pretty far, and if you press and hold the jump button, you'll see him kind of struggle in the air to gain a little more altitude, which lets you reach further heights but also gives you some room for error when you make your jumps. Actually, as a platformer, Yoshi's Island is pretty forgiving. Not only can you use this kind of hover maneuver to land jumps more easily, but when you get hit, you'll notice that you don't die instantly like you do in other games. Actually, Yoshi is almost invincible. He's only vulnerable to things like falling into bottomless pits and falling onto spikes. When he does get hit, he gets stunned for a second, and Mario, who's riding on his back, goes flying off and starts bawling like a little baby, since he is a baby, and you need to get him back before a countdown counts down to 0, at which point a bunch of Koopas will swoop in and take him away from you, and you'll lose a life. This leads to some tension-filled situations, since you'll be taking a lot of hits and constantly trying to recover Mario, but you'll find that you really don't die often from this happening. It's just really an excuse for the designers to make the game a little bit easier than some other platformers, but also to fill each stage with lots and lots of hazards to get past. It's really quite a nice balance. But though the responsive mechanics of Yoshi's Island are really good, it's the level design seen throughout the game that's definitely the best thing about it. The game has this really amazing storybook look to it. All the backgrounds look like they're drawn using crayons or chalk, and it's just this really nice effect. They're colorful and imaginative, and almost every stage in the game looks different. There's just lots and lots of variety. You'll never quite see the same thing twice. All the levels have a different kind of feel to them, and in an age when most platformers are 3D these days, it's amazing to look back at a 2D platformer like this and see just how much variety can be squeezed out of this kind of format. There are a lot of surprises along the way. Lest you think everything is all cutesy and just kind of silly, there's just a lot of good, weird stuff that young and older gamers alike should really appreciate. For example, Yoshi can at times turn into different vehicles, which is bizarre and unexplained and just really pretty cool. He can turn into a helicopter, a submarine, a little car, and even what's called a mole tank, which is basically a combination of a mole and a tank. This, again, it requires no explaining. Suffice it that each of these vehicles controls differently and is fun to use, and figures differently into the gameplay. There's also a few stages where you'll see some floating spores kind of wafting through the air, and if Yoshi happens to eat one of these or even touch one, you'll notice his eyes kind of grow dim a little bit, and suddenly the background starts undulating like waves, and the music slows way down, and you can see that Yoshi's having trouble with his tummy a little bit there. It's a pretty funny effect. In each of the game's 6 worlds, you'll face 2 different bosses, and these are also one of the highlights of the game. All the game's bosses are basically gigantic versions of some of the more mundane enemies you'll come across, and they're not particularly difficult to beat, but they're all just really inventive, really cool looking, and just fun to fight more than anything else. You'll have to go through all the stages one at a time initially, but there's incentive to go back and replay them. You can unlock various secrets and bonus games and so forth as you go back and try to find all the hidden stuff in every stage, and since the gameplay is so fun, you'll really feel compelled to do so. It's just a game that has quality written all over it. It looks and sounds great, it plays great, it holds up incredibly well. And just about any gamer would enjoy it. It's the difficulty isn't punishing like with some platformers, and just the whole thing is a lot of fun to play. So if by some chance you never played Yoshi's Island, you should definitely take this opportunity now. And even if you have, it's still just a really great game to add to your GBA collection.